End of the World Prophecy Number 8. Population collapse, American infantilism, social media, and the end of aging. So I've got some good news and some bad news. But they're kinda all mixed up together, and some of you aren't going to like either. But that's a you problem, not a me problem. I'm just telling you how it's gonna be. First, a world population collapse is here. Birth rates in industrialized nations have been on the decline for decades. This just happens naturally in any civilization. The more options you have on what to spend your time and attention on, the more people will choose other things to do besides sex. Because when you're living in an undeveloped country and you've got no money to spend on extracurricular activities, and maybe no electricity to keep the lights on at night, doing the nasty is one of the few but better options to pass the time. America has maintained a strong influx of immigrants to counterbalance the lower birth rates of natural citizens, so we have not seen the decline that most of the Western world has. But the worst will be in China. They have the largest aging population in the world and nowhere near the number of young people they need to replace them in the workforce, which also means they won't be able to feed and support themselves in the near future. Expect famine and starvation deaths in large numbers. But that is also the biggest factor in China's economic collapse. Expect a lot of the goods the US imports from China to go away forever. In many cases, we no longer produce things here, so we need to reshore production. But that will take years to shift. So expect to do without. Especially because that's the way the government and their oligarch puppet masters planned it. Forced minimalism. You may have heard the World Economic Forum say about it, you will own nothing and be happy. It doesn't get much overtly Orwellian than that. But the millennials won't even notice, because they've had to go without for so long. Going from the bedroom in your parents' home to a crappy apartment or rented house with roommates or even a tiny home, minimalism was a necessary survival skill long before Wall Street wanted to buy up the rest of the homes in America. They say that social media is making us dumber, but it actually just reveals how dumb we've always been. The real problem is American infantilism. It began with the post-World War II Golden Age. It's natural for you to want to give your children the things you never had growing up, for them to go on to have a better life than you. But the boomers were so spoiled and became so selfish that children are no longer living better lives than their parents. But it has grown progressively worse with each generation. As Gen X, I freely admit that half my friends growing up were slackers and stoners, but I could still kick them in the ass and motivate them to do their job. Millennials were the sit down, shut up, and do what you're told generation. As a result, they have almost none of the country's wealth even though they are the majority of the workforce. And almost all of that small amount of millennial wealth that exists belongs to the corporate scumbags or the talentless entertainers like Taylor Swift and Beyoncé. It's gotten so bad that as we progress down through the age groups to the younger millennials and the working-age Gen Z kids that they can't even handle working a 4-hour shift without breaking down crying and posting it on social media. Not to mention the low sperm counts and lack of interest in sex in the younger generations. And you can go on YouTube and find countless videos of teachers quitting because the next wave of children, called Generation Alpha, are so far out of control they can't handle it anymore. The boomers were nowhere near as bad as the generations that came before them, but they were still overall shitty parents. As a result, the pendulum swung the other way and the Gen X and Millennial parents were too soft on their kids, they have no discipline, and we are all going to pay for it. This is not sustainable for society. Man babies like Adam Sandler or Will Ferrell are hilarious as characters in a movie, but are just sad and pathetic in real life. Fortunately, AI is going to eliminate most jobs so they won't have to work anymore. I hope we figure out the food and shelter situation before that happens. I have faith we'll reach that Star Trek future we all hoped for as kids, but it's going to be some hard times until then. Instead of learn to code, the mantra will become learn to fish or learn to farm. But the one saving grace, which about half the people in the church hate the idea of, is we are at the brink of not just stopping the aging process, but reversing it. The lead expert is Dr. David Sinclair, a tenured professor in the Department of Genetics at the Paul F. Glenn Center for Biology of Aging Research at Harvard University. He has successfully reversed aging in mice and monkeys and has begun the human trials. I've read his papers and the science is legit. This is fucking real, the end of aging. It will be affordable and readily available. But a lot of people don't want to live longer. Many stating because their job and life suck, so why would they want to keep dragging it out? But you know what, if you lived 150 years and the best you could ever achieve in that long amount of time was self-checkout assistant at Walmart, you should probably just go. The unexamined life is not worth living and all that shit. See ya, wouldn't want to be ya. But that's totally your option, you do you, boo. Me, I'm gonna live for 1,000 fucking years. The First United Church of Cthulhu will go on forever. We're gonna rock and roll all night and tentacle party every day. But in the meantime, be sure to subscribe for more horror, occult, and Lovecraft madness. Later, haters.